welcome back to Solar Expression. I am your girl Paulette, and thank you for joining me once again. We are still in story time, which is the interview Celena's debut. Today we are doing part 2. Yes, part 2. Now in part 1, where we left off, Celena had asked a series of questions to Micaela about obtaining her degree. And the next question was trying to get more information and dive in a little bit more into Micaela's life. Now, where we're going to pick back up is where Micaela is now contemplating whether or not she should answer the question. Part 2 is going to give you a little bit more insight, just like a little bit of bite into where the story is going to go. And then part 3, we're going to dive even more. So, without further ado, we're going to... Oh, wait a minute. Did you hear that? Yes, that is music. I have added music just to give us a little jazz it up a bit, so you don't just hear my voice, but you also get to hear a beautiful song by Angela Christie. So I do hope you enjoy her music, because I don't own the rights to it, as well as the story. So let's pop over and jump into Micaela and Celena's life. So without further ado, here it is, the interview, Celena's debut, part 2. Okay, let's get cracking. Bracing herself for the next question, Micaela looked over at her husband, Doug, who, see the grimacing look on her face, asked the producer for a quick break. The producer had a note displayed on the teleprompter notifying Celena of the request, and she flawlessly worked it into the conversation. Once taping stopped, Doug swiftly walked over to his wife to assure her everything was okay. Micaela expressed her uncertainty about how far the interview will go and how much she wanted to expose. While Doug and Micaela were exchanging thoughts during their conversation, Celena stood to her feet, adjusted her jacket, looked for her mirror, which was a little bit off to the camera, adjust her makeup, and waited for the producer to let her know when to begin. As she waited, she pulled out her phone and began to check her messages in order to keep her excitement restrained. Finally, she received cue to proceed, so she put her phone in her pocket, sat down, and began. Welcome back. We are in the midst of our conversation with Micaela Cullinson, who had just given us information on obtaining a biomedical engineering degree for those who might be interested. Now, Micaela, can you tell the future scholars how you were able to obtain your scholarship to Johns Hopkins University, which, if I may say, is a great school? The interview's question was another attempt to pull more information about Micaela to make the show interesting. Looking at her husband's smiling face, Micaela explained, "To be honest, I didn't know anything about applying for scholarships or that they would even cover the full cost of my education. My only goal while I was in school was to focus on passing all my tests and getting out of there." However, one afternoon while sitting in the counselor's office, she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. Not fully understanding the question, I answered, "I want to be smart and successful." A smile crept onto her face as she recalled the conversation. Celena told her guest, "Well, that's not a bad thing for any young person to strive to achieve. So I think you answered the question very honestly." Yeah, I took the question literally because the reality was I didn't see college in my future, Micaela responded. Her guest's response piqued Celena's interest even more. Continuing with the next question, she asked, So how do you go from not thinking about college to attending one of the best schools in your field? Even though the reporter's question seemed innocent to her, it carried a lot of weight to the Woman of the Year recipient. Micaela sat quietly for a minute, contemplating whether or not she should share her story with Celena and the audience. Suddenly, the words, "We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony," rushed into her mind. It was as though God was giving her permission to share her testimony. Clearing her throat, she brushed the loose curly hair from her round face and began speaking. The journey was not easy, and it's a story that we probably won't have enough time to tell. Celena was not going to allow the moment to slip through her fingers. Instantly, she saw an opportunity to run the story in several segments. To take the pressure off her guests, Celena told her, "We have all the time you need, as I am sure many would be interested to know about you and your journey. After all, this is your day, remember? Please share with us what you can." The engineer was not particularly ecstatic about giving free time, yet she soldiered on and answered aloud, "That's good to know, but where do I start?" Leaning over slightly, Celena informed her guest, "How about you start where you feel comfortable?" The early years. Micaela's eyes glazed as she began to recall the early years of her life. Comfortable about the direction for the information she was going to give she boldly answered, "When I was a little girl, my dad used to say, 'Anything you want, young lady, will cost you something.' I didn't know initially what he meant until I asked for some ice cream and he told me it'll cost me a kiss on the cheek or a hug." This went on for as long as I could remember, until I was about 8 years old. My mom made some delicious bundt cake with fresh pineapples, and I wanted another piece. So of course, I knew I had to give him a hug or a kiss on the cheek. Ready to kiss his cheek, I stood by him at the table, expecting him to turn his cheek. Except this time, he kissed me hard on the lips. I was shocked because he had never done this before. And it just so happened 2 days prior, how a teacher had brought this old woman in to warn us about adults in authority doing things that makes us uncomfortable. At 8 years old, I didn't quite know what uncomfortable meant, but something didn't seem right to me or felt right as I sat down and I ate my cake. Needless to say, it was the last time I asked my dad or any adult for anything. Micaela stopped to give Celena the opportunity to speak. I have to say, I truly would have been terrified myself if it happened to me. I didn't know they thought about molestation back then, but you bounced back very well. How did your mother react to such an action from your dad?" Celena asked. "Well, right about the time of the kissing incident, my parents were arguing consistently about everything. Since since my mother never seemed to do anything right in the house, she looked over at him sternly. As the years go by, I noticed she started coughing a lot and began sleeping later and later, which caused contention with my father. One day when I was about 16 years old, I came home from school and my mother wasn't there. I waited and waited for hours, but she never came home. Later that evening, when my dad walked through the door, I ran to him frantically, alerted him she was not home. He closed the door and calmly responded, "I know." Still freaking out about her absence, I asked him where she was, and he flatly responded, "She left, and don't ask me any more about it." Which I knew meant it was not up for discussion. The last time I spoke to my mom was the night before she disappeared, when we sat at the dining table. She looked so thin and frail, which made me mad, because it was obvious something was wrong. Yet my father didn't seem to care, and it made me mad even to this day. The tone in Micaela's voice made it apparent that her anger was still prevalent. "Why didn't you ask her if something was wrong while she was around you, or to your dad when she left?" Celena asked. And that's where we're going to stop for this session. Part 2, I hope, again, is giving you more insight into where this story, at least you think where this story is going to go. Thank you again for tuning in. Once again, I hope you enjoyed the song, or should I say the tunes, as well as the story. We will pick up with Micaela's response in part 3. Don't forget to stay safe, mask up, social distancing, wash your hands, and as we are getting into the Christmas season, please resist the urge to gather in large groups. Please spend carefully and wisely, as well as continue to love your family, even from a distance. Zoom is there for everybody. Make use of it. Thank you again. I enjoy spending time with you, and I look forward to having a next video and also listening and seeing your comments. Once again, this is Paulette. You're watching Total Expressions. DM me, Paulette.TotalExpressions on my IG. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and do so now. Love you guys. Until our next video, stay safe, stay prayed up. Love you. See you later. Ta-ta.